I want to begin my sermon by saying, we love the New Testament. We're a New Testament church. And part of the reason why I picked the scripture reading I do is to focus on the New Testament book of Acts presently. I'm not opposed to having some scripture reading from the Old Testament, not at all, but I do put an emphasis on the New Testament, and I hope you do too. And I'm trying to nudge you and influence you to put an emphasis on the New Testament. However, the Old Testament is something we love. In today's sermon, I'm going to talk about a biblical character from the Old Testament. The lesson we can learn from Elijah, and I'm going to put 9 lessons from Elijah in this sermon. 9 lessons from Elijah. We're only going to be in 1 Kings throughout the sermon, and we're not even going to read a lot of it because of time. We try to not have these sermons go long. Again, if you want more preaching time, you can come to the interactive Bible study at 1. You can come to the Bible study at 2. But we try not to have a long sermon. So I will talk about, we'll look at 1 Kings, and we'll look at 1 Kings 19, we'll look first there, 1 Kings 19. 9 lessons from Elijah, the biblical character of Elijah. We love the New Testament, but we learn lessons and we value teachings in the Old Testament as well. And so let's look at this. 9 points. The first point is Elijah experienced discouragement. Elijah experienced discouragement. Now, the reason why that's important for us is you may sometimes experience discouragement. You can actually sometimes experience depression. Or you can experience a lot of emotional pressures in your life. And we have a man like Elijah who is one of God's own. God worked with him. God used him. God blessed him. But even he experienced discouragement. Let's look at 1 Kings 19, verse 4. Let's notice the discouragement. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die, saying, "It's enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I'm no better than my fathers." Now, we don't want to be that way every day of our life, okay? That is not the goal of a Christian who wants to live a way of peace and love and happiness and joy. And so that should not be most days in our life. But there come days in our life where we might be like Elijah. How do you handle it when you have this situation arise like Elijah? He was ready to die. Of course, none of us would ever take our own life. We would never do that. But on the same token, we look forward to the afterlife. I don't know what it is, but I believe it's an adventure. And so as far as for me personally, it's going to be an exciting adventure. I do want to stay around to help my wife, my boys, my grandchildren, and I want to help you and be a part of your life. But as far as for me personally, if I were to die, that's good for me. That's a wonderful thing for me. You say, well, what exactly is it going to be, Dave? I don't know exactly. And those who think they do may not have as much of a clear idea as they think they do. But the thing is, it's going to be an adventure. And we're going to share that too. Once we all pass that state, once we all go into the afterlife, we'll be able to share not only these experiences, but we'll be able to share those experiences too. But Elijah, a man of God, a man who believed in God, a man who knew God, a man who talked to God, a man who listened to God, was discouraged and came to a point that he was ready to die. The second point, what caused Elijah's discouragement? What caused discouragement? Let's look at verses 2 and 3, still here in chapter 19. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "So let the gods do this to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time." And when he saw this, he arose, ran for his life, went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. This woman, powerful woman in civil government, she basically said, "Yeah, I'm going to kill you, and trust me, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to make sure it happens." Now, that's interesting that this got him discouraged. He ran for his life. The third thing I'd like to ask, though, is this. Why did Jezebel's threat affect Elijah? Sometimes I've taken the cheap joke of saying if you have to deal with an angry woman, that's worse than anything else in the world. It's a cheap joke. But, her threat, while she meant it, it was not worse than everything else he's faced. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. So why did that threat cause him to be discouraged? On the handout, I have these phrases. Elijah had a relationship with God. He had been God's messenger. Elijah had just successfully confronted Ahab and false prophets. He won. Was Jezebel's verbal threat worse than the confrontation with the hundreds of false prophets? And I would say no. These here in front of all the people, all the peer pressure, and from all these people, he's going against all these hundreds of false prophets, standing alone for the way of God. Very, very tough circumstance, very tough situation. Her verbal threat was not worse than what he faced. On the handout I have, the difference was Elijah's perspective. He saw the challenges from the hundreds of false prophets and dealt with it. He heard these one words of this lady, and he was having trouble processing it. He was having trouble dealing with it. Now, a couple things to know. Elijah was exhausted from the stress, even positive stress, from the successful confrontation. He won. He was the winner. He went in there and he made his claim to God, and God answered his prayer. He won. But the fact is, even though it was positive stress, it still wore him out. Now, I point this out to you because you're dealing with stress in your life. All of us deal with stress in our life. And how well we deal with stress in our life determines how happy we are most of the time and how successful we are most of the time. So we have very positive stress. Then I also put Elijah's body, his mind, and his emotions relaxed. I've mentioned before, and I've asked people to be praying for my wife. She's the main caregiver of her parents, and it's wearing her down more than it wears me down. We do it willingly. We want to do this. We've chosen to do it. We've been doing it for 2 years. She's been the main one doing it. But the fact is, it's wearing her down. And, of course, we all know that the job of a caregiver is very demanding. And sometimes we wear ourselves down, and sometimes we wonder if we're going down faster than the people we're taking care of. You know that to be true. So again, a lot of times if you're a caregiver, a lot of times when the person dies, the caregiver gets sick. Because the caregiver's all this adrenaline, all this work, all this energy for weeks, months, years, and then the person you're taking care of dies, and your body relaxes, and a lot of times that's when people get sick. You know that to be true, because either you've had that in your life, or you've seen it in other people in their lives. So again, here he's had this where he's had this positive stress, he's had this victory, and all of a sudden, now, this one lady makes one sentence, "I'm going to kill you," as mean as she might be, as harsh as those words may be. He got affected by this. He was ready to go to God and said, I really can't take this anymore. I need reprieve. I need break. Let's just briefly go through some of the things he dealt with. Let's look at some of his success. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. And Elijah the Tishbite of the inhabitants of Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be no dew nor rain these years except by my word." I really like this, and many times I talk about this in sermons. But here he comes. He's bucking up before the civil leader. This would be like going before Presidents Trump, Obama, Bush, the presidents of all the different countries, Merkel, the head of the EU, all of these people, and going in and saying, this is what's happening to this nation, and it's going to happen based on when I tell you, because God's going to tell me, and I'm going to tell you. That's a very powerful example. What kills me about it, what really amuses me, it amuses me of the next things that happen. It really amuses me, because he's got all this adrenaline flowing. He's got all this energy flowing. He just talked to the leader who could cause him great trouble. And all of a sudden, the word of the Lord came to him saying, "Get away from here and go east." Okay, he says, "I've been to Washington, D.C., and I got to go east." Okay, am I going to England or Spain Where am I going exactly? Where's east of Washington, D.C.? Where am I going next? Because I have this powerful message I just gave, and what powerful message am I giving next? But that wasn't the thing was he wasn't to give a powerful message next. He said, go east and hide. What? I just laid it on the line to that president. I just laid it on the line to the Supreme Court. I just laid it on the line to the Congress. I just laid it on the line to the emperor. Wait a second. So this was your plan for me to go in there and spill my guts and tell them that I'm your servant and they're going to have to listen to me? And now you want me to hide? Why do I have to hide? I think it's so amazing. Because you put yourself in Elijah's shoes. You're sitting there strutting like a peacock thinking, I did it, I said it. Or maybe you're not filled with pride. Maybe you're just, whoosh, I did that. But now God says, okay, now I want you to hide. Why would I have to hide? Where would I have to go? So again, this is real life emotions, real life situation. Then verse 8, he comes to help a widow. Then the word of the Lord came to him saying, arise, go to here, and then help this widow. For I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. So this widow was to provide for him. This was part of God's way that he would sustain his life. He wasn't going to be rich. He wasn't going to be out in front of everybody. He wasn't going to have a lot of favor. He was going to go and have this widow take care of him. Verse 17, he says a prayer because the widow's son died. And he said a prayer, and God brought the son back to life. Elijah didn't bring him back to life. Elijah was the tool who said the prayer. All the different times that I've anointed someone and they've gotten better, it's not because of me. Every time you've anointed someone and they've gotten better, it's not because of you. God can bring someone back to life, or God can make something go away, or God can heal a body, and we give God the credit. We just want to be a faithful tool who understands faith and hope, and we don't want to make any of these crazy promises that many religions talk about. That's just not the way it works. But we give God the credit as we try to do our part, our little part in it. Okay, then chapter 18, verse 1, it hadn't rained for 3 years. It hadn't rained for 3 years, and God sent Elijah back to Ahab. He went back to him again, and then verses 3 through 6, Obadiah was sent to find water because it hadn't rained for 3 years. They were in a drought, and they were looking for water. And Obadiah met Elijah, and Obadiah gave a message from Elijah to Ahab. Verse 17, then it happened when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said to him, is that you, O troubler of Israel? Are you the man who troubles Israel? Well, the answer was clear in verse 18. He said, no, I haven't troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, in that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and you have followed the Baals. Now therefore send and gather all Israel to Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's tables. So here, these are the religious leaders of the land, and their prophets were coming together, and he was going to have this standoff with them and make this proclamation to see who God was behind. I don't want to say who I'm about ready to talk about. I will say this. I've had that challenge given to me 2 separate times. One time a man said to me, let's both of us stand before God and call down rain, and whoever God is behind, that's who he'll send the rain for. This was a man, I won't say his name, because I don't want to embarrass him, actually. I don't want to embarrass him. And I tell people this, and I'm sure I didn't handle it the best, because when you put down words don't convey everything you really mean. But I prayed over it. I worked that letter, worked it carefully, but I'm sure no matter how well I did that letter, I'm sure it came across badly to him. But I basically told him I was rejecting his challenge, and I told him that I was recommending he get over some of his anger issues and that he get some professional help. Again, I said it much better in the letter than I said it here. Well, his son, who's not a member of the Church of God, contacted me, and I thought, I'm going to get reamed out by a family member. But the son who's not a member of the Church of God said, it was a wonderful letter. I'm glad you wrote it to my dad. My dad's not going to heed your advice, but I really appreciate you trying to help my dad. So the Church of God person did not take it well, but the person watching all these religious people make proclamations, whether they're Catholic, Baptist, Church of Christ, or Church of God. Many religious people make proclamations that they mean well, but they may not be the best thing. By the way, there was another man who I knew. This was not an elder, but was another man a little bit weeks and months later who did the same thing to me. He asked me again. He wanted to get together, and we get together and call down fire from heaven to see if God was behind me or was behind him. I happen to know this guy for a long time ago. I did tell Dixon at the time the journal was still going. I said, why don't we have both of them together and do a journal article on it? But the reason why we didn't, because I didn't want to embarrass either one of those fellows. That's why I don't say their names publicly. I didn't want to embarrass them because it would have made a great story. It would have been a human interest story to have those two who believed that God would back up their claims to them to do it. But so I'm aware of people sometimes wanting to imitate what they see in the Bible, either in the New Testament or the Old Testament. And again, I never wanted to do this. I never claimed it. But Elijah did. According to the report, Elijah did. And Elijah got in there, and he said, who are you to trouble? You're the one who's troubled Israel. And again, they got all these together. I'm not going to go through all the story. You know the story really well. How Elijah, they both offered their bullock. Then, God supported Elijah. Elijah killed the prophets of Baal. And then Elijah told Ahab of the coming rain. I just briefly went through that to show the third point. Why did Jezebel's threat affect Elijah? Well, really, why would that do it? It had to be something within him, because he had done all these powerful things. God had done it through him. He had taken these powerful stands that God had done it through him, and this one little lady's criticism, threat, caused him to go into discouragement and depression. Brethren, I'm telling you, you have many successes in life. And while you have many successes in life, don't be surprised if all of a sudden you get discouraged over something that seems smaller or less significant. For one thing, life goes in cycles. Life goes in cycles. And to give you an example, have you ever heard of the phrase post-feast letdown? Well, if you have such a great Feast of Tabernacles, and then you come back to real life, life goes in cycles. And by the way, for those of you watching, we don't want the highs and lows of life. We don't want this. We want this. We want the hills of life. We want to get excited about things, but we don't want to get crushed by things. So again, we want to be happy, but we don't want to get crushed. And you will go through this. None of us goes through totally good, positive. None of us goes through totally flat. None of us goes through totally perfect. You don't do it. Don't pretend you do. But we want to avoid the big ups and downs of life. But life has a cycle that way. The fourth comment. God helped Elijah physically. God gave Elijah physical help. Chapter 19, verses 5 through 7. God helped him physically. And of course, we ask for that. Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." In a small way, again, I use the Sabbath like some of you get to use it, and I did a lot of extra sleep this day. And after church, I'm going back home and get some more sleep today. I'm going to try to recharge all my batteries today, that tomorrow I'm back as just like I should be and ready to hit the full week. But again, God gave us a chance. By giving us a Sabbath day, He gave us the opportunity to get that rest. Now, some of us haven't used it. Some of us didn't need to use it as much. But now as certain things in life happen, I'm really appreciating a Sabbath rest more. And I'm glad you understand and be supportive of me on that. But God will help you get that rest. And God will want you to eat. And of course, we've got people in this audience who are very knowledgeable about food. Very knowledgeable about the right types of food to eat. Now, we might have some slight different ideas, and we can share those ideas, but we don't want to be judging others who do things a little differently than we do. We don't want to be cramming things down each other's throat. But again, if someone asks you, some of your understanding of food issues, please share them. Again, give them the 2-minute answer. Don't try to give them the 3-hour answer. If you give them the 2-minute answer, if they're interested, it can turn into a 3-hour discussion. But don't assume that you have 3 hours to give them, because quite frankly, if I ask you for some food advice, I probably don't want to talk about it for 3 hours. I probably don't want to do that. But I might want to hear something. I want to hear a nugget, a jewel that you can give me that could help me. And I try to do the same thing to others. You know, I've been talking about sometimes some of the older people I know get combative. And do you know one of the reasons that is? A UTI. A UTI many times causes people to do that. And so, because again, I found out through the last decade, when I've seen people go through rough spots, whether my mother-in-law had been through it when she got combative, and we found she had a UTI. Robert Ferris got combative up in Bonham. He actually broke a TV one day, and of course I was his guardian, and so they called me up, and I said, "Can you check to see if he has a UTI?" And sure enough, they checked, and he did, and then he got help for that, and he was back to his sweet normal self again. And so that's why we encourage older people. We encourage everyone to drink a lot of water. But we encourage older people to also drink a lot of water, because different things happen that can cause us to act certain ways, to react certain ways. So again, here God will help you physically. He will help you physically. Number 5, God gave Elijah emotional help. Emotional. Look at chapter 19, verse 8. He arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of the food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. He spent 40 days getting to that mountain. From my understanding, it doesn't take 40 days to get there. It's a shorter trip. But what he basically said is, why don't you go and smell the roses a little bit, look at the scenery a little bit, don't push it to get there, and really enjoy life a little bit. And so again, that's what the Avies are doing this summer. That's where the Killingleys went up to Wisconsin. And different of you go on different trips. This is kind of get your emotional break. You want to actually get it fresh away from the normal routine. Maybe spend time with your families. Maybe spend time with friends. Maybe just relax a little bit, because when you get back in the grind of life, you sometimes can't carve out the same amount of time for that. But God wanted him to have emotional help. And quite frankly, I need to do, when I do more of my walking, that's a good thing. I need to get back to walking more, because it's a good stress relief for me when I do that. Number 6, God heard Elijah's complaint. See, God will allow complaints. Now, we know in the story of Job, Job's complaints got so bad that God finally had to correct him. Because he was saying Job was saying pretty strange things. You're out to get me. Everyone's out to get me. It's not worth following God. Those were some of Job's complaints. And so finally God talked to Job and said, you need to examine how you're complaining and how much you're complaining. You need to back it off a little bit. But verse 9, he went into a cave, spent the night in the place, and beheld. He said, "What are you doing here, Elijah? Why are you here? What are you doing here?" And the answer was, "I've been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone, I'm left, and they seek to get my life." I want you to notice something I have on the handout. It's not just discouragement. It's subtle elitism. Subtle elitism, meaning, look at the good things I'm doing. I haven't done anything wrong. Look at the good things I'm doing. And woe is me, because these people have dropped the ball. They've dropped the ball, and I'm doing the right thing. And so that can happen to any of us who are trying to do the right thing. As you're trying to do the right thing, that can happen to you. I mean, we want to do the right thing, but we want to fight this elitism attitude that he went through. But he heard the complaint. He heard the complaint. He allowed Elijah to say it. He heard it, he understood it, he knew why Elijah was saying it that way. Number 7, God loved Elijah. Verses 11 and 12, God had sent a strong wind, he sent an earthquake, he sent a fire, but the last part of verse 12, he sent a still small voice. In fact, that's one of my traveling sermons entitled, A Still Small Voice. And I just want to remind you what I had said to you years ago here and what I say in traveling sermons. Sometimes God will answer you in an earthquake. Sometimes God will answer you in a tornado. Sometimes God will answer you in a very majestic, powerful way. But sometimes God answers very quietly. Quite frankly, I look for God's answers very quietly. Personally, I do. I'm not looking for him to make some dramatic show on my behalf or for my behalf. I don't look for that. I'm listening for the still small voice, knowing it's from God. Because you see, when you're not wanting to impress other people in your religion. You're not wanting to show how great we are, and that's why I've even made statements that people have not understood what I meant. I'm not big on praise reports because I believe in praising God, and I believe in being thankful to God. But I personally believe a lot of praise reports that I see in this world are about the individual, and they're not really about God. They're more about, look what God did for me. Look what God did to me. And it's almost like the individual is the highlight of the show. And so that's why, again, I'm sure some of you would disagree with me on that. That is your prerogative to do. But I'm not a big fan of praise reports. First of all, praise reports I think should be done privately. A praise report should be done in a small circle of family. They can be done in a small circle of friends. And the example I use is like I've seen cases like years ago, there was a school bus crash over in Terrell. A school bus of school kids. And some of the kids died. So people got on TV and said things like, God spared my daughter because we have faith. She didn't realize that she was accusing the other families of not having faith. Or, God saved my daughter because he loves me. Ma'am, you're just accusing all the people who died. You're accusing them of God not loving their kids. And I know you're exuberant. I know you're not trying to send that message, but that's the message you've sent. So that's why in praise reports, we should be praising God regularly, but it's more quietly as opposed to, ta-da! We don't draw a lot of attention to ourselves. You know, that's very important for us not to do that. Anyway, he heard the complaint. But then God loved Elijah. He gave him the still small voice. Number 8, God gave Elijah work to do. God gave Elijah work to do. Verse 14 is the exact same thing as verse 10. I read in verse 10 that Elijah said, I've done all these things for you, and they're trying to kill me. Well, in verse 14, he repeats the same answer. So I give you my opinion. This is my opinion. Even though the words are the same, I believe his attitude in verse 14 was different than verse 10. That's my opinion. I believe that even though Elijah repeated his earlier words, I believe his outlook had changed and he was ready to be productive again. So sometimes it's not the words that are the problem, it's the attitude behind it. So again, verse 10 he said it, and it didn't go over so well. Verse 14 he said it, and it was better received. But again, I think his attitude had changed. But see, God gave Elijah work to do. And I do, if you've seen the Edifying the Body article, Lenny Cascio mentioned about we need to do things. They can be a lot of small things, or they can be big things. He said you can run for an office, that's a big thing. Or you can feed someone who's hungry. Quite frankly, in my world, I do a lot of little things. And I like doing a lot of little things. I'm not doing a lot of things that are noticed. A lot of you serve really well, but you're not doing it for the great attention. And a lot of you are doing a lot of service. You're doing a lot of good things. And I think that's a wonderful thing. But he gave him 3 jobs to do. He said to appoint Hazael to be king of Syria, to appoint Jehu to be king of Israel, and to appoint Elisha to take Elijah's place as God's prophet. So again, what God will do after he gives you the physical help, after he gives you the emotional help, He hears your complaints. He shows his love toward you. And then he gives you some work to do. Again, the work is not about us. The work's about helping other people. So again, we look to do things for the way of God. We look to do things for God. And we're happy to do those things because he gets the credit. We want him to get the credit. Number 9, God reminded Elijah to see the big picture. In verse 18, I want you to notice this. Verse 18. He says, yes, I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, and all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Now, why would he say that? Remember what Elijah said? It's only me. They're not serving you. They're not loving you. Israel's not doing their job. And I'm out here doing the best I can. I'm doing everything I can. And they're trying to kill me. And so what he's saying is, yes, you're doing a good job. I've got some work to do, so I want you to continue doing a good job. Oh, by the way, Elijah, there are more people doing a good job too. Now, for the record, many times people take numbers in the Bible and they take them literally. In other words, what I mean by that, they would say, does that mean there are only 7,000 people in the whole world today who are true believers? Well, I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe that's the case at all. I don't know how many true believers there are. God's the judge of that. By the way, I do happen to think the number is smaller than many people think. I think there are a lot of people around the Church of God who really are doing the best they can, but they really don't know the Lord. And just like in the situation where Paul on the road to Damascus was doing these things for the Lord, in his mind, of course he was beating them up, throwing them in prison, and killing them. He was doing that for the Lord. He had a motive to serve the Lord, and Christ said, you don't know me. I believe there are a lot of people who are keeping the commandments who don't know the Lord. Keeping the commandments is a good thing to do. And you say, Dave, who are they? I'm not anyone's judge. I don't read anybody's heart. I don't know. I'm not even trying to figure it out. I'm just saying is, I'm not going to be surprised by how little or how few know the Lord. I've got to do what I'm supposed to do. I've got to focus on what I'm supposed to do. Someone could say, what do you think about that preacher over in the Church of God over there? Well, first of all, I don't listen to him. I don't know what he's saying or not. He may be a preacher for 30 years. I'm not interested in that because it involves their congregation, not mine. And I'm just watching people show fruit. I really appreciate all the Church of God who show fruit. I appreciate all the Baptists who show fruit. I appreciate all the Church of Christ and Methodists and every one of them who show fruit, and I appreciate their good fruit. I'm not in it for titles. That is Church of God. That is Catholic. I'm not in it for titles. I'm in it for fruit, behavior. When someone does bad behavior, that's not a knock on God. When someone does good behavior, that's a good thing that person made that decision, and that person made the decision, and they're being blessed for it. And maybe they're even helping me be blessed through their good behavior. And I want to be one of those who help other people. I love helping people who are not a part of the Church of God. They're not a part of the Church of God, but I want to be a blessing to them. I want to help them. And again, we just want to do the right thing. The point is, if you ever get to a woe is me attitude, if you ever get to a point saying, oh my, this is too heavy, and things do get heavy, I'm not diminishing that at all. That's why I talk about it a lot. I'm trying to help you deal with heavy times. I'm trying to help you deal with health matters and real trials and real troubles. I'm trying to help you because these are real situations, but God's answers are real, and we want to find the real answers. As I've told you before, that one of the sermons I gave years ago was when I can't fix it. That was one of my sermon titles, When I Can't Fix It. Because most of the things I deal with, I can't fix. I'll still talk to you about your situations. I'll still talk to you about your trials, but I can't fix it. But I do know the God who can fix it, and I can promote the God who does fix it, and I can help you get plugged into the God who will fix it, and I can be an encouragement. I can exhort you, as they talked about in the interactive study. I can be an exhorter, but that's the way I can plug you into the one who can fix it. Be careful of the different men and women in the churches and the church congregations who say they can fix things. Hopefully they're a good influence on you, and we all want to be a good influence on each other. So again, when you're going through trials, when you're going through troubles, and it looks like You know, you don't always see the appreciation you think might be there or you were expecting. God at the very end may say, oh, by the way, you're not alone. I'm working in you, but I'm working in other people too. And then at that time, there were he mentioned 7,000 people. But at the time, that was a big number to Elijah, because he was going from, I'm the only one, to, really? There's 7,000 more? I'd like to know who they are. And God would probably say, well, you just do what you're supposed to do, and you'll run into some from time to time. And when you run into some from time to time, serve them and let them serve you, and try to serve the Lord. Anyway, as I said, we love the New Testament, but we do love the stories in the Old Testament. We do love the lessons in the Old Testament, and today I wanted to give you 9 lessons from Elijah.